back from the cremation ceremony, Guru Maharaj said that rigor mortis does not affect a pure devotee. And we all know that Guru Maharaj very rarely spoke about Srila Prabhupada's final pastimes, choosing not to. But on this one rare occasion, he said that Srila Prabhupada's body was so soft, and he too had no evidence of rigor mortis. And Shamla's body was similarly soft.
Bring it.
I'll go there. Okay.
And that he moved the arm and fingers with great ease. There was another act of Guru Maharaj which caught my attention and is worthy of mention today. Guru Maharaj, earlier that day, just before we left home to go to the crematorium, he removed his own garland from his neck and he asked for it to be handed over to him when we got there. I found it very significant that Guru Maharaj had garlanded His Holiness Shamlal Prabhu with his own Mahaprasad. This occurred despite the fact that garlands from the deities were available and that also we had new fresh garlands at home. So what this shows, that Guru Maharaj was intentionally conferring his own sweet mercy to his dear departed friend and god brother. In fact, Guru Maharaj said that he did not want to take off his own garland at the crematorium because it could have been misunderstood by some people. So this means that it was a premeditated act of kindness. And it therefore begs the question in our minds, who really is this personality, Srila Bhakti Charu Swami, who has walked amongst us? Do we really know him? Yeah, he may be our spiritual master, or we have some dealings with him, but do we really know him? No one can truly fathom the heart and mind of a Vaishnava. Vaishnavera kriya mudra vigneha na bhujaya. Even a very learned and intelligent scholar cannot understand the activities of a Vaishnava. Just as we use water from the Ganga to worship the Ganga, similarly, let us use Guru Maharaj's own words to worship him. From leaving on the 4th of July till the Samadhi some 10 days later on the 13th of July, even though the Vapu was kept in cold storage for most of this time, His Grace Krishna Kishore Prabhu, who went down into the Samadhi pit, says that Guru Maharaj's Vapu was soft and pliable and that he had no difficulty to place Guru Maharaj in the Samadhi position. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj ki jai. Both Guru Maharaj's appearance and disappearance is intimately connected with America. There's an interesting story connected to Guru Maharaj's Tirobhav. During the night preceding Guru Maharaj's departure, an employee from the hospital where Guru Maharaj was being treated had a dream. In this dream, she deduced that a very, very important person was at the hospital. And she felt this way because hundreds of dignitaries had come there and they arrived in all kinds of exotic vehicles. Now, this lady is not even a Hare Krishna devotee, but she got the privilege of seeing the entourage of Vishnu Dutas and other great personages who had assembled with their spaceships to welcome Guru Maharaj back to Golok Navadvip. So we have to process Guru Maharaj's departure using transcendental lenses. A Vaishnava is known by how he induces others to chant. When Lord Chaitanya appeared, the sadhus in India were chanting. And when Guru Maharaj departed, the whole planet for almost 2 weeks was reverberating with the holy names. This had never happened before in the history of the Sankirtan movement. Guru Maharaj induced so many Vaishnavas to chant, so many quality rounds and extra rounds. Even members of the Gaudiya Math and the Ritviks were holding special prayers for Guru Maharaj. So such is the glory of the disappearance of a truly transcendental and exalted Vaishnava. Guru Maharaj was never alone. Just as Krishna's birth and activities are transcendental, so too are those of his pure devotees. For a person who knows this as a fact, there is no more birth, Bhagavad Gita says. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj ki jai. I first met Guru Maharaj in 1990 by the mercy of the devotees. My mother-in-law, Shantarati Devi Dasi, had approached His Holiness Shamlal Prabhu to kindly bring Guru Maharaj to our home. She was particularly concerned about her 6-month-old grandson, Yastil, who was getting very severe asthma-like attacks that sometimes turned him blue. And during that visit, our very own Gaura Hari Prabhu was traveling with Guru Maharaj. And seeing his mild mannerisms and soft countenance, I remember thinking, this is how a servant should be. Gaura Hari Prabhu is certainly one of those brilliant gems adorning the body of Srila Gurudev. At that very first meeting, Guru Maharaj gave me my first instruction. After the class, Guru Maharaj called for questions, and I put my hand up and asked him to relate a pastime of Krishna. And Guru Maharaj then spoke about that raining flutes in Vrindavan pastime, which I had never heard before. It's not in Krishna book. And then Guru Maharaj took the liberty to return the favor. He asked if I knew what Kanti Mala meant. I was already wearing neck beads and gave the usual answer of taking the association and protection of the pure devotee Tulsi Maharani. And then Guru Maharaj looked at me directly and said, one who wears Kanti Mala should never speak a lie. This struck me like a ton of bricks. I had not heard this explanation before. And more importantly, I was in a habit of telling white lies. I had a tendency to manipulate the truth. It was not malicious or devious, but just a tendency to act a little smart, sometimes. And at this point, my mind began racing. How did Guru Maharaj know? And how was he able to see right through me? Right there and then at our very first meeting, Guru Maharaj gave me my first instruction and addressed one of my big anarthas. Of course, at that time, I had no clue that he was taking on the role of a guru. Brahmanda Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasada Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. I got chastised a few times, quite a few times. And I witnessed many really get the sauce. And compared to others, many disciples felt that I got off lightly. But to me, those words of Srila Gurudev still weigh very heavy. You know, in response to a direct question, Guru Maharaj once said that the spiritual master chastises the disciples in proportion to their ability to handle it. By all accounts, I don't think that I'm able to handle heavy chastisement from Guru Maharaj. In 1992, we made our first trip to Mayapur. And as a courtesy, I would always ask Guru Maharaj if he required any service. And Guru Maharaj would always give me something to do, just out of his kindness. You know, he always engaged me in something for himself. And on one such trip to Ujjain, he asked me to bring the books of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. And when I asked Guru Maharaj how many, he said, oh, just carry 20 sets. Because, you know, he wished to donate them to the various temples in India. And, you know, many of the people in India were not so familiar with Maharaja's writings. Now, at that time, I did not know that His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami had already published some 20 odd books. So 20 sets of 20 books, that's 400 books. In total, I had something like 164 kilograms of luggage that trip. Now, picture the scene with me trying to act nonchalant and carry like 60 kilograms of hand luggage and also act as if, you know, it's just nothing, it's featherweight. And at the same time, trying to distract the airport staff from noticing the scale, which was way out of range. You know, it was in the stratosphere. But somehow, miraculously, I did not have to pay anything for excess luggage. And they all went through, you know, we went through some 3 different airports and they were apparently unnoticed. So what's this? This is obviously, you know, Guru Maharaj's uncommon mercy. By the way, in one of those books, His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami glorifies Guru Maharaj. How wonderful it is to see this transcendental play between Guru Maharaj glorifying his god brother posthumously by distributing his books, and with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami already incorporating Guru Maharaj's glories in his books. Now, Guru Maharaj did not know of these writings because these were recently published, and I had the privilege of handing him his very first copies. And when I read him that one section from one of the books, he was, you know, he was visibly embarrassed by what Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj had to say. So let's go back to this 1992 story of going to Mayapur via Singapore. So Guru Maharaj asked me to get him a few items from a specialist Sony store there. And when I went to that store, you know, I was like a child in a candy shop. I remember, and just remember that in South Africa, although we had, you know, these products available, but there were no exclusive branded specialty stores at that time. The stores would just carry several brands of products in one store. So it was a very, very new experience for me to see one shop dedicated only to one brand. So that in itself was a novel treat, you know. And needless to say, I splurged and bought myself 2 still cameras. I bought a high-speed 8mm high-speed movie camera with all its accessories, a Sony professional recording device for recording Guru Maharaj's lectures. And for Guru Maharaj, I got him the latest Sony compact hi-fi system, which, by the way, is one of the mementos still in Mayapur today. You'll see it there. Yeah, this same unit was in Guru Maharaj's room in my home, and he really liked it. And it had some, for its time, he had some very unique features, like it had a double cassette player. And that's how it was unheard of, a double cassette player. And he could play continuously from one cassette to the other. So it was like, you know, non-stop playing. And Guru Maharaj liked that, listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures or even listening to some music, things like that. And on top of all these things, I got Guru Maharaj the top of the range dictaphone, as well as a cordless phone. Now, all of you know it. Guru Maharaj he loves all this technology and he loves all the latest gadgets and so on. So after landing in Calcutta, we decided to drive straight to Mayapur, which proved to be an exhausting trip of over 4 hours. Now, this is my first experience of covering 150 kilometers in 4 hours. Normally in South Africa, this kind of distance will cover in about even less than 1.5 hours. So nonetheless, we got to Mayapur and immediately got up to Guru Maharaj's quarters. After the warm welcome, we excitedly displayed all the presents, which Guru Maharaj was very pleased to accept. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, Guru Maharaj's mood changed. He became silent. His lips first began quivering. Then his lower lip started curling, especially from the left-hand side. And his face turned red. I had never seen Guru Maharaj like this. Of course, I was still new with Guru Maharaj, just hardly a couple of years with him. But this was all new to me. And I was puzzled by the dramatic turn of events. Then Guru Maharaj, in a stern and authoritarian voice, he began speaking with a lower tone and a slower than usual pace. And then he said, "Why don't you listen?" Now, I did not say anything. I just stood there, transfixed like a statue. After an inordinately long, awkward silence, Guru Maharaj, in a much calmer voice, said that he told me to buy a specific model of the Sony dictaphone. And why did I not do that? And to this I replied that I was aware of his request. And in those days, like when Guru Maharaj would say something, I would take it like it's a request. This is not something big. Guru Maharaj just asked me to do something. It's like a request. So I was aware of this request. That's what I'm telling him. But I actually got him the latest top of the range model. Thinking that Guru Maharaj would, why are you settling for a second best? Let's get you the best. And this costed several $100 more than the model that Guru Maharaj wanted. So Guru Maharaj then said, "Don't you know that these ultra-sensitive devices are useless in India? They're useless in India. They cannot handle the power surges." And it was only then that the penny dropped. Oh, I felt so small. And I wanted to run away. Actually, I had only arrived half an hour in Mayapur. And this is my first trip ever. And now I wanted to run. There's no place to hide. And the lesson I learned from this is that Guru Maharaj's instructions are to be followed to the letter. And not to ever think that we knew better. Guru Maharaj's warning not to trust our flawed senses suddenly made perfect sense. Why don't you listen? One unforgettable line uttered once by Guru Maharaj and serves as a constant reminder to this day. And I think that every sadhaka who is struggling like me can adopt this sutra that emanated from his lotus mouth. On one occasion, one of our dear God sisters came to get Guru Maharaj's darshan. Her Grace Malati Mataji from Durban, South Africa. She's a very simple soul who had given her youth right up to her old age in full-time temple service. And for those who would remember her and the old temple president's small pokey office at Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Mandir that was situated opposite the Sankirtan office on the ground floor. Guru Maharaj was seated behind the temple president's desk, and I was on his left side, opposite the desk, seated on the bench. Now, the now late Malati Mataji humbly entered the room with her sari draped around her head in respect. No sooner had she sat down, Guru Maharaj began blasting her. He bellowed, "Didn't you know you have to offer obeisances to your spiritual master?" And mysteriously, Mataji began smiling. Now, this act seemed to irk Guru Maharaj even more. You can imagine, Guru Maharaj is chastising her and she's smiling. It's like Rasa Bas, right? And Guru Maharaj was getting more upset and irritated by her uncanny response. From a simple smile, her smile whitened, and now it was revealing her teeth. But the Guru Maharaj continued the heavy chastisement. And then this Mataji began to laugh audibly. And Guru Maharaj is raising his voice. He is, many decibels higher than from where he started. And he was asking her if she thought this was a joke. And in order to stop the sound of her laughter, she placed a hand over her mouth like this. But one could still hear the muffled tones coming from her closed mouth. And the more she did this, the heavier Guru Maharaj got. And thus, by this time, the sounds were coming out from her nostrils. And in order to stop those, she pressed the ala. Ala is the sides of the nose. She was squeezing the ala. She was squeezing the ala together. And now she had a mouth closed and she was squeezing the ala. She was both. So, you can only do this for so long. Well, you have to breathe at some point. So eventually she had to release it to breathe, and holy moly, again, the sounds of laughter emanated. Not knowing what to do, and with Guru Maharaj getting angrier by the second, she just walked out of the room. Then Guru Maharaj asked me, go and see what's going on with her. So when I went out, she was just outside in the passageway. And in between trying to contain her laughter, which was now, she was just wild. She told me that this was the first time in all her years as a disciple that she had received personal chastisement from Guru Maharaj. And this put her into raptures. Now, this is a very rare manifestation of Hasya Ras. Her ecstasy knew no bounds. We read about these things in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya's emotions were such that they were uncontrollable. His bodily features would become distorted. His limbs would become elongated or get shorter, and so on and so forth. And here we could see in this Mataji, she was displaying something very uncommon and rare, which I had never seen before. So when I went back and reported to Guru Maharaj that, that she was just in ecstasy because she got chastised, that she had never been chastised before, then Guru Maharaj, I expected God to say, okay, bring her in, tell her to come in. But he did not. He just let her be. He just continued. He just moved on as if nothing had happened. He seemed to understand her uncommon display of transcendental emotion. And so now I say, to evoke such transcendental spiritual emotions in anyone, it will have to take the effect from a transcendental personality. You know, one day, a few of us were enjoying fruits at the dining room table with Guru Maharaj. And Guru Maharaj, whilst conversing with His Grace Hemanga Chaitanya Prabhu, he asked him if he had seen anyone eat mango peel in India. Now, Hemanga Chaitanya Prabhu is born in India. And he responded that only in South Africa he had seen devotees eating mango peel. And he seemed to catch on to Guru Maharaj's mood. And he was very much into, that Guru Maharaj was now obviously onto something. And then Hemanga Chaitanya Prabhu, he also said, in a laughing tone, that he doesn't know why the devotees are doing this. And he was, and Guru Maharaj and him seemed to be enjoying a rasa between them. And then Guru Maharaj said that it is considered low class in India to eat the peel, to eat the mango peel. Now, all my life, I ate the mango peel together with the pulp. And on this day was no exception. So I actually enjoyed eating the mango peel, and I also understood that the peel was also full of nutrients. But Guru Maharaj had a very unique way of chastising me, sometimes without directly addressing me, as in this case, he called me a low-class person, and he had a good laugh about it. Oh, man, how much we miss Guru Maharaj's relishable wit and guidance. This, somehow, I feel Guru Maharaj has, through his departure, promoted all of us. We are now being given the opportunity to delve deeper into a realm of Vipra Lamba Sevaya. That is the highest platform of loving reciprocation in separation from the object of love. This is actually the essence of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And I want to say that, Guru Maharaj has not left. He is playing hide and seek, and he is eagerly awaiting our arrival. And to keep us safe, Guru Maharaj has repeatedly reassured us with these three enduring eternal gifts. Your love for me will be shown in my absence by how you cooperate with each other. The GBC is the ultimate managerial authority, and no matter what, never leave your spot. Prabhuji, should I continue speaking? Are there many questions?
Okay, let's thank you, Jagadananda Pandit. Kind of just mesmerized by your speaking, actually. But it's a good opportunity, and I'd encourage devotees, if you have any questions, please do ask. Here's a unique opportunity. You can either put your hand up or in the chat. Okay, we have one, Murli Chaitanya Prabhu. Okay, please can you tell us what, in your opinion, makes a good servant of Guru Maharaj? Very good question.
Oh, okay. How many questions we have at this point?
This is the first one.
Okay.
Out of 10.
Yo, that's a loaded question. Sure. Can I ask a friend? Anyway.
Can you ask a friend 50-50?
You know, the entire body of Vaishnava literatures is designed to awaken our Sambandha Gyan. That means Jivera Swarupaya Krishnera Nityadas. This is actually our constant meditation on how to become a servant. So the entire Bhagavatam deals with this point almost exclusively, actually. So in the context of serving Goma directly, you know, I have witnessed a few recurring characteristics that I found to be true universally among those who consistently please Guru Maharaj. And the first of it is the eagerness to serve. Somehow we have to develop this eagerness to serve. When I look back at my own development and progress, there was obviously a time in the very early days when I was not so close to Guru Maharaj. And I recall two incidents that probably accounted for a lot of the mercy. And both occurred quite soon after I had first met Guru Maharaj. On one occasion, His Grace Param Brahma Prabhu, a very wonderful God brother who's no longer with us, he was serving Guru Maharaj at the time. And knowing me to be a doctor, he asked one evening, late one evening, if I could get a medically prescribed cream for Guru Maharaj. So I went at that time to an all-night chemist. And in those days, there were very few chemists that were open all night. So I drove some 20-30 minutes to get to an all-night chemist and purchased the Travacort cream. And then drove to the temple, which was also some 30 minutes away, and gave it to Param Brahma Prabhu very late that night, thinking that, you know, Guru Maharaj would obviously need it. And the next day, you know, early next morning, Guru Maharaj could use it. And the second incident occurred whilst Guru Maharaj was staying at Sri Sri Radha Radhanath temple. And one day, one very rainy day, as he left the temple room, I had a golf umbrella ready for him. And you know, this small service of holding the golf umbrella from the temple room to his car that was waiting outside afforded me the opportunity to walk with Guru Maharaj and to be very close to him, or at least for those few seconds. You know, in those days, that temple walkway, that ramp, was not covered, so it was exposed to the elements. And I remained standing at a vantage point, thinking that, you know, Guru Maharaj will come back just now, and he would also need the benefit of the umbrella when he comes back. Otherwise, he'd get wet, going from the car park to wherever he was going to go. So I remained standing at that point, at a vantage point, so that allowed me to see from a distance when Guru Maharaj's entourage will reappear. And I needed to do this because when the car arrived, there's some distance to walk from the temple to get to the car. So you don't want the situation where the Guru Maharaj arrives, opens the door, leaves, and then you get there with the umbrella. So that means he's already wet now. So when that happened, a few hours later had passed actually, and I didn't mind so much waiting because I had nothing to do and there was nobody around, and it was a good time to just chant some rounds. So when Guru Maharaj arrived a few hours later, he was very pleased. He was very happy that the umbrella was available again. And he said, "So you've been here all this time?" And I'm mentioning these two incidents, not like in a boastful or arrogant manner, but with a deep sense of gratitude and humility, to personalize my answer with my own examples. Every one of us almost daily gets opportunities to render service. So developing the mood of eagerness to serve is incredibly empowering and a potent way to attract mercy. So the second trait is attentiveness. And Guru on many occasions would remark and acknowledge when a servant was attentive. To a good servant, Guru Maharaj would not have to repeat an instruction. And to the best servants, no instruction was necessary. They would anticipate Guru Maharaj's needs and they would prepare beforehand. Being aware, being alert, and being organized are essential components to being attentive. The third characteristic to my mind is to become expert. Now, there's a beautiful verse in the Brahma Samhita. Lakshmi Sahasra Sata Sambrahma Sevyamano. That word is Sambrahma. Sambrahma means expert. These Sahasra Sata, hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis, goddesses of fortunes, were expert at serving, are expert at serving Krishna. We learn. Of course, practice makes perfect, but we have to practice by learning from those who are exceptional. And I remember, when His Grace Harai Pandit Prabhu would pack or unpack Guru Maharaj's suitcases, it was always a work of art. It was such a pleasure to just see him packing and see him unpacking. It's when you looked at it, it would appear perfect in the same way as goods are displayed in a high-end clothing store. They're all neatly packed, they're perfectly arranged, and they're organized in different categories. Most of us do not know what it is to please the divine couple, nor do we know how to serve them. However, by becoming the servant of the servant of the servant, we get the safest opportunity to render some devotional service. Becoming expert actually means becoming purified, because pure devotees, one of their 26 natural characteristics is that they're expert. So sometimes we may have a desire for some service, but without the knowledge of how to do that service, we could end up creating a disturbance. Like so many people love to serve Guru Maharaj, but they would sometimes not do it correctly. Like if you didn't serve in the order in that Guru Maharaj taught us, or did not, spill some rice on the floor, for example, or touch Guru Maharaj's plate with a spoon, instead of pleasing Guru Maharaj, we would end up doing exactly the opposite. Actually, once Guru Maharaj chastised me heavily for allowing someone to put on his shoes. That devotee was very eager to do the service, but he fumbled in front of everyone and he made Gurumaj very uncomfortable. He put it on incorrectly also. Later, Gurumaj told me that if someone is putting on my shoes, then at least make sure that they know how to do it correctly. So we see that like these characteristics in my mind probably would be at the top of the list. Obviously, this is like a Bhagavatam class now. This is a seminar topic on its own, this question. But this, in my experience with being with Guru Maharaj and hearing from Guru Maharaj, I think this, in this order, would be the priority. That we develop an eagerness to serve. No point serving. And you find that, and I found also those who are not eager to serve, those who lost the eagerness to serve, end up outside the service of Guru Maharaj. So keep that fire to be eager. That enthusiasm is an essential, necessary component. And the second is to be attentive. I think these three characteristics are true even for us now. They're not just only like when we physically serving Guru Maharaj for us now, but everything that we do. Just only like when we physically Guru Maharaj. So yeah, I hope that answer suffices. It's clear that this is what I think that makes a good servant. Thank you, Gaurapriya. Any other questions? Oh, there's another question that's come up. Prabhuji, another question that's come up.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's attention to detail. All right. So one question we have, I have a question from Radha Krishna Prabhu. If I jump to that one, it seems to have come directly to me. His question is, not everyone has the chance to touch Guru Maharaj's body as often as you, especially you being a personal servant for many years. Could you share any realizations in this regard? But it's obviously a very intimate service. I'm
yes.
Yeah.
The very first time,
it's a very intimate service.
That I saw Guru Maharaj's like body, the back of his body and his legs, I recall thinking about the unusualness of his bodily color. I was spellbound actually by the radiance, by the glow and the golden complexion. In my profession, I'm required to examine the human body. And it's no exaggeration, to take another Guru Maharajism. It's no exaggeration that I've examined more than 100,000 human bodies in my career so far. And I'm yet to see anyone who has a similar color as Guru Maharaj. No one, not even remotely similar. And Guru Maharaj's body is different. My background training screamed, is this some kind of, malady? Is there some pathology going on? Is there some, please check for jaundice, for example. Or is there, is this due to excessive beta carotene? This is the dye that's sitting in carrots and things like that. But all those things are conditions related to ill health. And on the contrary, Guru Maharaj showed no signs of any illness. In fact, he was hale and hearty. And the telltale signal was that his sclera is the white of the eyes. which is always incriminated in these skin staining disorders, that the sclerae were white, clear. So that effectively ruled out any of those conditions. But more than that, Gumaj's transcendental hue is a reflection of his deep attachment to Srimati Radharani. Every time I touched Gumaj's body, I got the same impression. Once, whilst massaging Gumaj, he began to speak on an esoteric point. He said that, that when a spiritual master takes rest, he is not asleep. Sleep is in the mode of ignorance, and a pure devotee cannot be in ignorance. A pure devotee is never in illusion. So when a pure devotee takes rest, what's happening is that he is actually withdrawing his consciousness from the outside world and projecting it inwardly. This internalization means that he is going deep into the region of the heart, where Krishna is resident. And here's the caveat. He goes into conference with Krishna. We all know that Srila Prabhupada told Gumaj that in his heart, Krishna is present in his two-handed form. In every other living entity, the Paramatma is there in four-handed form. But Prabhupada told Gumaj that in his heart, Krishna is present. So suddenly the penny dropped. Many of us would know that Gumaj would take regular cat naps, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And this is often was done before any class or any program. And thereafter, Gumaj would give the most amazing presentation. And often he would do this without any prior preparation. In fact, many a time Gumaj would sit on the Vyasasan, not even knowing which was the Bhagavatam verse for that morning. So those were not power naps, dear devotees. Those were intimate moments in conference with Krishna. This is, so, this is some, Gumaj's body is transcendental. Everything about Gumaj is transcendental, He's Jivan Mukta. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
I have a question from Raymond. You mentioned that you served Guru Maharaj in a medical capacity too. I was just curious if you had any further pastimes or realizations from this relationship with Guru Maharaj that you can share.
Gumaj had arrived in Durban on a flight from Mauritius. And whilst driving to the temple, he said that he wanted me to look at his feet, which had become very painful since early that morning after he went for a swim in the sea. So Gumaj swam in Mauritius, then some hours later boarded the flight, and now he's in Durban. And we're driving to the temple, we're driving back. So soon after the usual welcome and arrival lecture, Gurumaj retired to Srila Prabhupada's room at Sri Radha Radhanath Temple. His Grace Sunil Mohan Prabhu, an ENT surgeon, was also present, and both of us entered Gurumaj's room, where Gurumaj was gingerly removing his socks. And what we saw next shocked us both. Shards of coral had become embedded in the pulp space of a few of Gurumaj's toes. The pulp space is the bottom section of the toes, the opposite side of the nail. And Gurumaj was in obvious pain, and there was evidence of inflammation, swelling, tenderness, redness, and sepsis was already starting to creep in. So this is a medical emergency. And we politely suggested to Gurumaj that we take him to the local casualty and we'll arrange the theater there and we'll remove them, under strict conditions. Gurumaj was having nothing of that sort. He refused point blank. Then we suggested, okay, we'd rather take him then to our consulting rooms and do the procedure there. Again, Gurumaj refused. Gurumaj can be difficult sometimes, especially with medical treatment and therapies. He had his own mind, and he makes up his mind. It's very hard to convince him otherwise. Although Gurumaj had almost every day took some Ayurvedic preparations, but he had something against allopathy. It gave him problems. He always had some issues regarding allopathy. So now we were both stumped at this point. We don't know what to do. There was no ways that these wounds were going to recover without first surgically removing those embedded foreign bodies. So then we suggested that, okay, we would do the procedure in Srila Prabhupada's room in the temple. And incredulously, Gurumaj agreed to performing the procedure right there. So His Grace Sunil Mohan Prabhu somehow managed to pull some strings and got a sterile surgical pack, complete with gloves, surgical spirits, dressing material, and all the necessary instruments. And from some contact, to this day, I don't know how he was able to pull off such a feat in a remarkably short time. But thank Krishna, he did. Of course, this was still a suboptimal arrangement with any number of things that could have gone wrong. Besides adrenaline, we did not have any immediate backup to drips and oxygen or emergency intubation should something have gone wrong. So as I proceeded to administer the local anesthetic, Gurumaj started vehemently to object. And Sunil Mohan Prabhu was trying his very best to reassure Gurumaj and keep him calm and keep him from moving. At one point, Gurumaj just flatly told us, just stop and leave me alone. I had to intervene and tell Gurumaj that in this situation, we are not his disciples. As his doctor, this procedure is absolutely mandatory. And we knew that if we left it untreated, it was sure to progress to potentially life-threatening cellulitis and even gangrene. So in the short time of like about 10 hours since the swim that morning, Gurumaj was already showing worsening signs. And you know, it's a tough balancing act. It's a very hard service to be Guru Maharaj's doctor and disciple. It's always better to do one or the other, but to be both is very tough, you know, and you're mindful of the third offense. You know, and for various reasons, this was not an easy operation. These cone-shaped shards of coral that have numerous sharp spikes, you know, it's shaped like a Christmas tree. If you imagine Christmas tree, an inverted Christmas tree, and you use the top end of the Christmas tree to penetrate something. So, you know, this is how these corals were. They're like, you know, like arrows inside. And aside, you had these spikes sticking out. So if somebody simply remove these objects in the way that they entered, that means if they entered this way, you take it out in reverse. If you simply do that, you run the risk of causing even more tissue damage. And that means delayed healing and complications and more pain and so on. And also, there is also that very real danger that as you pull it out, you break off the tips. So you leave small foreign bodies inside, which we may not be able to identify right now, and they will complicate later. So it was, you know, it was challenging to say the least. And I had to focus on the job at hand. And I was oblivious to the complaints of Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj was complaining bitterly all along. And in fact, I think Guru Maharaj may have cursed me and all us both at that time. And I think if Srila Mohan Prabhu is on this conference, he maybe could say something if he's here. You know. There were other medical adventures with Guru Maharaj.
Continue to
Say that, Prabhuji. Sorry. Sorry.
That's fine. Go on. Sorry, continue.
Okay. You know, there were a few other medical adventures with Guru Maharaj. You know, there were a few other medical adventures with Guru Maharaj. But the toughest of them all was a very defining instruction Guru Maharaj had given me. He said, on more than one occasion, that should something happen to him, that I should not allow anyone to put any pipes in his body. He said that Srila Prabhupada did not want that, and the body of a pure devotee should not be violated like that. The first time Guru Maharaj told me this was after his first heart attack. And about a year or so later, Guru Maharaj withdrew this restriction mercifully and saying in all humility, who was he to think that he was like Srila Prabhupada? He said, that instruction was for Srila Prabhupada. Then again, a year or two later, Guru Maharaj told me the same thing that he told me the first time around. But this time he added another part to the instruction. He said, should anything happen to me, make sure, you know, and should anything happen to me and I am not able to respond, make sure no one puts any tubes in my body. This is still gut-wrenching for me. I don't know how I'll face Guru Maharaj. my my only solace is that when the decision was contemplated whether to admit Gumaj to ICU or not, then Gumaj himself left it to the GBC to decide. And I must say that I think most of the world is in full agreement with the GBC decision. After all, the alternative meant zero chance of survival. And the hospital where Gumaj was admitted had a disproportionately high percentage of successfully weaning people off ventilators. So, you know, the odds were stacked more in Gumaj's favor to recover than not to. But still, I'm unsure if that absolves me of the heavy responsibility thrust on my shoulders. I've told you already about the Travacot story. That's another medical thing. And, you know, over the time, Prabhu, I'm going to switch off my video for a while. The sound is buffering, if you don't mind. And also give me a chance to compose myself. Thank you. You muted Gora Hari Prabhu. Trying to...
I think just
you muted. The sound is, quality has deteriorated a lot.
Okay.
Oh, other people are also saying the same thing. Gora Hari Prabhu, other people are also saying that your sound is bad. So maybe you can turn off your video and the sound will improve.
Okay. Did that help?
Yes, Prabhuji, please go ahead. Prabhuji. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to apologize for some of the technical difficulties. I think the sound here is a little unstable, but we want to extend our thanks to you, for I was just remembering actually the sound system, Sony sound system. I wasn't there actually, very much. And it's still, as you say, in Mayapur. Yeah, I used to play some CDs on that as well and crank up the volume to maximum. So yeah, fondly remember things. So, okay, I think normally we kind of have about hour and 15 minutes. I think perhaps we can call it to a close, wishing Jagadananda Prabhu great big thank you, big Haribol. I just wanted to thank you for your association, and thank you everybody for joining in this session. And we look forward to meeting again next week. Is that okay, Jagadananda Pandit Prabhu?
Yes, thank you very much, Gaura Hari Prabhu. Thank you so much for putting this all together. Really appreciate it. Just forgive my indiscretions and my mistakes, please. Forgive me for
No, not at all. No mistakes. No mistakes. No. Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All glories to Guru Maharaj and all glories to Prabhupada. All glories to Guru Maharaj and all glories to
Hare Krishna.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Charu Swami iti namine Snigdha Cheta Shupraneta Vagminam Charasha Pratam Prabhupada Katha Prana Nomi Bhakti Charu Padana Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pucharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pashyatha Desatarine Srila Bhakti Charu Swami Guru Maharaj Ki Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Jai Ho Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everyone.
Hare Krishna.